Welcome to an Atheist Freethinkers video. The video you're about to view was recorded on the 19th of November 2022. We were very pleased to welcome a major figure in the freethought, secularism, and ex-Muslim movements, an author and human rights activist who has done so much to dispel the cloud of misconceptions and dishonesty which surround the issue of Islam and radical Islam. I am, of course, referring to Yasmine Mohammed. Her book, Unveiled, How Western Liberals Empower Radical Islam, the title says it all, has been translated into some 15 languages. Recently, it was published in French translation by a local Quebec publisher, Jet Bleu, under the title Lever le voile ou comment les progressistes occidentaux favorisent l'islam radical. We will be joining the discussion just after I ask Yasmine the following question. In your opinion, why is there so much opposition to Quebec Bill 21 in the rest of Canada?
My book was just translated into different languages. It was most recently translated into Spanish. I'm getting so much support from Spanish feminists in a way that I've never gotten from feminists in North America. And that's because feminists in South America, Spanish-speaking feminists, they are very aware of how the Catholic Church has been breathing down their neck, making all sorts of limitations on their lives and on their livelihood. And that has happened recently in Quebec. People have stories, they have memories of their mothers, of their grandmothers being controlled by the church. And women in the Anglophone parts of Canada don't have that memory. People in the other parts of Canada don't have that memory. So when they look at Bill 21 and they don't really understand the need to very strongly support secularism, they consider it to be some way of discriminating against people because of their identity. So it's really, I think that's what it comes down to, is they're just ignorant of the situation. They're ignorant of the fight.
Mm-hmm. Okay. In the rest of Canada, there are several organizations which claim to support secularism, but which oppose Quebec Bill 21. Could you comment on that?
So that's a misunderstanding of secularism. So this is the difference between American secularism and French secularism, for example. So in America, they think secularism means protecting religion. Whereas in France, secularism means protecting people from religion. It's a very different perspective, and it's a vital core misunderstanding or different understanding of the word secularism. So, I think that's really where it comes down to. So these so-called, quote unquote, secular groups and atheist groups, really, it's embarrassing that they are so ignorant about the true meaning of secularism and the true purpose of secularism. But unfortunately, we do see that, because the general understanding of the term secularism is freedom of religion, and they forget that it also should mean freedom from religion.
Okay. And speaking of France, perhaps you know that since 2004, religious symbols may not be worn by school children while in school. And I understand that researchers have found that since then, the academic performance of girls from Muslim families has improved significantly. But similar improvement has not been observed either for boys or for girls from other non-Muslim families. In other words, it's the ban on the hijab that has been beneficial. Do you think the Quebec government should extend Bill 21 to implement a similar provision here?
I would love that, to be honest. I mean, we're having so much trouble with the bill as it is. but I actually don't think that it goes far enough. And I would love to see a very strong support of secularism and strong support of women. This is something that we're really, the religions in general, but especially the religion of Islam, is so fiercely misogynist that when the religion is allowed to, when the religion is allowed to, I'm trying to think of a polite word. I want to say fester. I want to say control, dominate, when it's not being stopped, when there's no boundaries put around it, the first people and the most people to be, or the people to be hurt the most, are women. And so as a person who cares deeply for women's rights, that's mainly the reason why I speak out against this religion. Of course, it hurts everybody. It hurts men as well. It hurts, obviously, gay people as well. It hurts minority groups as well. But the way that it treats women is so inhuman. And that statistic that you gave is so meaningful, and it's so telling to see that as soon as you allow girls to just be themselves, what a difference it makes in their lives when they're not being completely controlled by this religion at all times. And make no mistake, the hijab is not just a piece of cloth. This is the thing, is it just looks like a piece of cloth, but it's like the handcuffs on a slave, or the handcuffs on a prisoner. That's not what makes them a slave. That's not what makes them a prisoner. That's just the physical part that you see. These girls are completely enslaved in their minds. And removing the hijab is such a huge, monumental thing, because it is the key. It's like removing the handcuffs. It's the first step in as I always say, free your head and then free your mind. It's the first step in them getting their freedom.
Okay. I'm going to wait for a minute for Pierre-André. In your many media appearances, you've had a lot in the last few weeks and months, you often talk about how accusations of so-called Islamophobia are used by Islamists and by their useful idiots to stifle open discussion of problems with Islam and Islamism. Can you explain this briefly? And related to this issue is, I'm sure you've noticed that even accusations of racism are used in a similar way. Apparently, Islamism has infiltrated the so-called anti-racist movement. And I call it so-called because the movement does not really seem to work against racism as it claims, but that's another problem. What is your take on all this?
So the word Islamophobia was created in Iran, by Islamists. So that should tell you that right then and there. In countries like Iran and Pakistan and Saudi Arabia, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, it is against the law to criticize the religion of Islam. It is against the law to criticize the prophet of Islam. And if you do, you will be imprisoned, you will be lashed publicly, you will be executed, all sorts of different punishments will happen to you. An example of that is Raif Badawi. All of you guys know Ansaf Haidar from Sherbrooke and her husband's situation, where he wasn't even criticizing the religion of Islam. He was just talking about liberalism. Now, when you see in the West, when people criticize Islam, see what happens to Charlie Hebdo, see what happens to Samuel Paty, see what happens to Salman Rushdie, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, to Ayaan Hirsi Ali, to Theo Van Gogh. The list is very long. Whenever anybody criticizes Islam, then they are met with violence. So it's the same kind of violence that the governments are dishing out in Muslim majority countries But when you're not in a Muslim majority country, you have to just rely on pious Muslims to go around and do the needful. And the word Islamophobia was created for countries where there are no blasphemy laws. There are no top-down blasphemy laws. There is no government to tell people you're not allowed to criticize Islam or you're going to go to prison. So instead, they created this word so that it can be a bottom-up control to stop people from criticizing Islam. So it serves the exact same purpose. It's to get people to be quiet, whether it's top-down from governments in Muslim majority countries or bottom-up from the people themselves. Created by the useful idiots, perpetuated by the useful idiots, the people that use this word, the people that silence others against criticizing this religion. They are the useful idiots that are doing the work of the Islamists. It's to the point, David, that even Iranian women speaking about the Islamic Republic of Iran, making it illegal for them to dance, to sing, to laugh, to ride a bike, to wear what they want to wear. And when they try to talk about these things in Iran, they'll be killed. And so they're in America trying to talk about these things on social media, and they're being bombarded with the word Islamophobia.
In other words,
people there can't even speak about it.
So Islamophobia is an accusation of Islamophobia is an accusation of blasphemy.
Absolutely.
It's a way to silence people. But used outside Muslim majority countries where there may not be a blasphemy law, or at least not as strong.
Yes, it's a way to silence people. Absolutely. So some may choose the violent route, like those who stabbed Salman Rushdie or those who killed the Charlie Hebdo cartoonists, and others choose the non-violent route of using the word Islamophobia, but it's to the same end. It's to the same goal, which is to silence you from criticizing this religion.
I'm going to go on with the next question. I understand that your mother and your stepfather, her second husband, are both Egyptian, and that in Egypt, some 98% of females undergo female genital manipulation, or
mutilation.
Mutilation is a more correct word, yes.
Yeah.
I also understand that it was the threat of this procedure being applied to your daughter that led you to make a life-changing decision. Please tell us that story briefly.
So, I was always unhappy with my life, but I was very scared. I was too scared to do anything about it because I was afraid that I was going to be, not only was I afraid of my mom and afraid of the man that she married and afraid of my brother and afraid of, being killed. I was also afraid of burning in hell for eternity and all of the punishments that would happen to me in the grave and all of the stories that they tell you is going to happen to you if you disobey. And so I accepted my fate as a Muslim woman. I say that I accepted it in the way you accept a cancer diagnosis. I felt like there's nothing I can do about this. I have no choice. I have no power. I have to accept this. This is my life. I'm just going to have to live like this. But when I had my daughter, I was now responsible for her, and I wanted to protect her, and I wanted her to feel nothing but happiness in her life and to never feel pain. And so when my mom and the man that she forced me to marry were having a conversation about taking her to Egypt and getting her mutilated, it was like, at that moment, I felt like I wanted to just take her in my arms and jump out the window. Like I would have rather, I just wanted to escape that room so desperately. And what made me stay put was the fact that my mom said to him, oh no, we'll have to wait until she's like 6 or 7 years old, and then we'll take her to Egypt and we'll get it done there. We can't do that in Canada. And so I thought, well, okay, I have, 6 to 7 years to get myself out of here. Because at the time I had a high school education. It was before social media. I felt completely isolated. And the thing here, though, is that as much as I hated my life up until that point, my daughter's life was going to be even worse than mine because I didn't undergo FGM. And so it's like this baby that I wanted to protect with every fiber in my being, I knew was going to have an even worse life than I had lived. Like it was unfathomable. And so that's what made me feel like I have to get out of this marriage. I have to get away from him. I have to get away from her. I just have to, it has to just be me and my daughter.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Concerning the burkini,
Mm-hmm.
In one of your media appearances, you asked the brilliant rhetorical question, would you celebrate Mormon underpants on the cover of Sports Illustrated? So why celebrate the burkini? Please comment.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they don't celebrate fundamentalist, extremist ideologies ever. You know what I mean? Like you don't see like Hasidic Jewish people, you don't see Mormons, you don't see them celebrating FLDS or Scientology, none of the, but my God, the hijab is everywhere. It's fetishized, not only on the cover of Sports Illustrated, but on Barbie's head and on the cover of newspapers and magazines. I can't click through any advertisement, any app on my phone, anywhere, all the time, for no, just there all the time, hijab everywhere, being so normalized, pretending that there aren't women rotting in prison right now over this hijab, pretending that it's just like this benign piece of fabric. I mean, if they did put Mormon underwear on the cover of Sports Illustrated, it would even make more sense because nobody is killed over Mormon underwear. You know, girls are being killed, not just in Iran, not just in Saudi Arabia, but in Canada, we've even had girls be killed over the hijab. But we're all just suddenly, I don't know, this ability to just pretend that it's this exotic, benign cultural dress. It's such a vicious lie. Like it's so cruel to pretend that this is just some normalized piece of clothing, you know? It's not like it's even, you know, people get angry over stuff that happened hundreds of years ago. And they're like, oh, this is an insult to the memory of, you know, X, Y, or Z. This is happening right now. This is currently happening. You know, when I was in Montreal, I sat with so many women from Morocco and Algeria, women who, you know, in Algeria, they had something called the Black Decade, where women were being killed over the hijab. If you weren't wearing a hijab, you were killed. And so many of those women ran to Canada, and a lot of them ran to Quebec because they speak French. And here in Canada now, they see what? They see their fellow feminists being kicked out of feminist groups for speaking up against the hijab. I mean, it's just mind-boggling ignorance.
I call it voluntary stupidity.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah.
But that doesn't explain it, but it is absurdly hypocritical.
Yeah.
In another of your media appearances, you explain that criticism is a major motor of progress. Without criticism, societies and religions do not progress or improve. Please comment.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the way you said it. I actually never worded it that eloquently, but I think I might in the future. It is definitely a major motor for progress. If we're not criticizing things, how do we ever expect them to change or get better? You know, it's crazy to me, especially, you know, at times like under Trump, when Americans were so comfortable criticizing their government, criticizing, you know, even to the extent, you know, sometimes it was even grotesque, like under for Canada Day, they were saying like, oh, we don't even want to celebrate Canada Day. We're so repulsed with our own country. And you know what I mean? Like it gets to the extreme. But what I mean to say is they're so comfortable criticizing their, you know, Catholicism or criticizing Christianity in general or criticizing their own governments. But when people from Muslim majority countries or people from Muslim communities try to criticize the abhorrent things that are happening, like you mentioned, you know, atheists being killed, gay people being killed, women being decapitated because they wore jeans, you know, the most mundane reasons for killing women. We're not allowed to talk about that. We're not allowed to criticize that, because if we do, then we are the bad guy. And it's like, well, why don't you want these communities and these countries to progress in the same way you did? Why were you allowed to criticize the church and to get secularism in your countries? Why were you allowed to criticize the patriarchy and to get equality for men and women in your countries? Why were you allowed to criticize homophobia and you now have gender equality and in your countries? Why are these things only for you? You know, these are universal values. Yes, they are being implemented currently only in the West, and so we call them Western values, but that doesn't mean that they are only for the West. You know, these are human rights, and we're all entitled to the same freedoms, not just people in the West.
I think that what it is a continued obsession with Europeanness. Mm-hmm. You can criticize Europe. Europe is the center of the universe. Mm-hmm. It used to be the origin of all things good. Now it's the origin of all things bad, but it's mm-hmm. still the center of the universe. So you can criticize Christianity, human rights violations in European cultures, but not outside.
Yeah, but they won't talk about the fact that, you know, we won't talk about how Arabs were involved in the slave trade. We won't talk about how Arabs colonized a quarter of the planet. We won't talk about how Saudi Arabia only stopped slavery when the Brits forced them to. They said, we're not going to help you get your oil out of your land unless you stop buying and selling human beings. And they only stopped in the 60s. They only stopped in the 60s, if you can believe it.
Half a century ago.
Because according to Islam, slavery is allowed. And the only reason why they stopped was because they wanted the money that they were going to get from their oil. And they weren't going to get the help of the big bad white man unless they stopped slavery.
In another of your appearances, you say that cultural relativism hurts the very group which one is ostensibly trying to protect. What do you mean by that?
So cultural and moral relativism are just deplorable. Like they're absolutely disgusting. Like right, things are correct. Like right is right, wrong is wrong, regardless of your geographical location. So what I meant by that statement was when I was referring to things like in my book, when I talk about when I was 12 years old and I went to, it was actually one of my teachers who noticed that I wasn't myself. And he after speaking to him, I shared with him the abuse that was going on at home. And then he told me that it was his duty to report this. And so he went to the police, and then child services got involved. And then it became this huge investigation, and it went to family court. And at the end of it, the judge said to me, this is your culture, this is your religion, this is your family, this is how your family chooses to discipline you. And so, you know, that it's different from the way other Canadians choose to discipline their children, but that's just because that's your culture. Keep in mind, this man knew that I was being hung upside down in the garage and whipped. And that was his response to me, was, that's your culture. You happen to have been born in that family, and they happen to have come from this country, so you're just going to have to endure. So that's what I was referring to. When they think that we're going to protect people's cultures, or we're going to protect people's beliefs, because that way we are being inclusive and diverse and we're being good people, what they're actually doing is they're protecting oppressors, and they are preventing victims from being able to speak up and be heard, because you've protected the oppressors.
Yes.
And that's what I meant by that statement. Yeah, it's not, unfortunately, it's not even something that has ended. It's something that still continues. I'm still getting letters from girls all across Canada, Australia, America, UK, Scotland, like everywhere, still telling me similar things. There are so many people working in social services that are Muslim. And I mean, I could tell you so many stories, but so many are popping up into my head right now. But I'll just tell you one really quickly of this girl from London who was 16 years old, and her family found out that she had a boyfriend. And so they threatened to kill her. They threatened, and they did beat her up, and they locked her in the house, and she somehow got child services involved. And when they came to the house, they brought an Urdu translator, which was unneeded because both her parents spoke English perfectly, but they brought an Urdu translator because they wanted to be culturally sensitive. And the translator said to her parents in Urdu, she's 16 years old right now, and in a couple of years, you will not be able to control her. So you better take her to Pakistan and get her married off now. And that's exactly what they did.
Oh.
And that kind of thing, I mean, I've got so many stories, but that's what happens when they try to be culturally sensitive. They're like, oh, they're from Pakistan, we better bring another Urdu speaking person. I've got stories from the Somali community as well. And like the stories go on and on and on, but they think that they're being culturally sensitive, or they think that they're being supportive, but really what they're doing is they're making it even more difficult for the girls in, you know, under this tyranny to speak out. And that's why what you said in the beginning about the girls in France being protected by their government by saying, you cannot put this clothing on these young girls. That alone lets the girl feel empowered in that country, because she knows my government has my back, as opposed to me, or as opposed to Sadia, the girl that I just told you about. You know, we got the opposite. We didn't feel that our country had our back.
Thank you. The next question, I guess you've already answered, because I wanted to, you said in another media appearance that the people who are the most racist are the very ones who claim to be most concerned about racism, and I perhaps you've already answered that, but yeah. Can you tell us a little about your Free Hearts, Free Minds initiative, which comes to the aid of ex-Muslims in Muslim majority countries?
Yeah, so when I was going through the the process of leaving Islam. So it's really just a lot of deprogramming, and it's a long, difficult process. Now it's referred to as religious trauma. Now there's research about it and it's understood a lot more. But when I was going through all of that, it was very difficult. I was very alone, you know, because I couldn't tell a soul that I used to be Muslim. My daughter and I had both changed our names. We were, you know, moving houses all the time. And I was terrified. I mean, the man that they made me marry was a member of Al-Qaeda. I knew he was in prison, so I knew I was safe from him because he was in prison in Egypt. But Al-Qaeda is a huge network, and I didn't know who he was going to send after me. And also my mother had threatened to kill me as well. So, you know, I was also afraid of her, or whoever she was going to send after me. And so you live in your head so much. Now I'm talking about my experience, but I'm in Canada. So I'm one of the privileged, lucky ones. You can just imagine if you're a woman in Saudi Arabia and you don't believe in this religion, or if you're a man in Pakistan and you don't believe in this religion, how terrified you would feel that anybody would find out. And so what made me start this organization is I thought, well, I barely got out of this alive. Like, I don't even know how I survived. And I'm living in a secular country and I'm straight. And so it made me think of people who are living in Muslim majority countries or homosexual people in Muslim majority countries and how terrified they must feel. So much, it must be so much worse for them than it even was for me. And the thing that really helped me was therapy, was just getting a lot of mental health support. And so my organization does exactly that. We've created a program that is geared specifically to religious trauma from Islam. And we have group sessions, which is really important because when you leave Islam, you feel so disconnected. It's a cult, right? It's a very tight-knit cult. And if you're not swimming along with the school of fish in the same direction as everybody else, you feel so isolated. And so it's important to rebuild the community again so that they can get to know other ex-Muslims, whether they're in the same country as them or whether they're in other countries. Luckily, because of the internet and social media, we can build these communities. And so it gives people a sense of hope, and it also gives them the skills that they need to keep their own mental health healthy so that they can, you know, one of our sessions is next steps. What can you do to find your freedom, to find your happiness? And for that, it's different for each person, you know. Sometimes, like, we've got a lot of people that are married with children. And so that restricts them in so many ways. We've got a lot of people that are still young and not financially stable. So not everybody is able to get themselves out of the situation that they're in. So sometimes they just need help to manage where they are until they can get free.
Okay. I understand that you testified before the Canadian Parliament on the subject of motion M103. That's the motion which denounces so-called Islamophobia and links it to so-called systemic racism. Mm-hmm. What is your take on M103?
You know, it's such a farce. It's the word Islamophobia, even when you Google the definition, Webster's will tell you that it is criticism or hate of the religion of Islam, Muslims, or political Islam. You can't even criticize or hate political Islam even. Well, I'm sorry, I'm going to hate Islam. Of course, I'm going to hate Islam. It caused me so much trauma in my life. It continues to cause so much trauma in so many people's lives. It's a religion that calls for my death, and I'm supposed to love it in return. Absolutely not. So you cannot tell me that I can't criticize this ideology. If you want to go ahead and talk about bigotry, you want to talk about racism, I'm 100% behind you. But we already have laws protecting people in those situations. So this Islamophobia term, first of all, is a false term. It's a misnomer. And I completely denounce the term in and of itself. But to try and have some kind of law that's going to enforce this, making it illegal to be Islamophobic, and then giving the definition of Islamophobia as basically free speech, free expression. So, it's against our own values for us to support something that says, I want to restrict Canadians' ability to speak out against an ideology. I'm gonna restrict a Canadian's ability to be free. It's really, it's just embarrassing, and it's disgusting, the fact that it was even put forward, but the fact that it was unanimously pushed forward by the Liberals too was just, it's just sad.
I think the unanimity comes from the fact that people are terrified to disagree openly.
Terrorism
it's terror.
works. Terrorism is a successful tool, and they use it, and it works for decades.
Another term you will probably love, Islamic feminism.
Yeah.
There's a Wikipedia page on Islamic feminism in 31 languages, including English and French. What do you think of that expression?
I mean, so Islamic feminism, I don't know what to tell you. That's the most paradoxical phrase I've ever heard. I understand that there are Muslim women who want to be feminists and who want to push for things like criminalization of domestic abuse, who want to push for higher ages of, marriage age, push for things basically that are against Islam. So those women exist, those feminists exist, but it's against Islam. That's the key here. So when Islam says that men should beat their arrogant or disobedient wives, then it can't be a feminist religion. The religion can never be feminist. Muslim individual women can be feminists and can be against these particular edicts in their own religion. But the religion of Islam is the polar opposite of feminism. And what you find is a lot of these Islamic feminists are actually just carrying water for the patriarchy. They're just convincing women that it's okay to agree, or it's okay to not fight back, or to accept that your husband can beat you because whatever. They come up with all of these rationalizations. So they're working against feminism. They're working against women because for them, Islam is paramount. The laws of Islam, the edicts of Islam need to be met. And then they work backwards from there. It's just like Islamic science, to be honest. It's the same thing.
An oxymoron.
Absolutely an oxymoron. It starts with the whatever it says in the Quran, and then they work backwards from there. And, it's a farce.
Okay, I have I'm not sure how our translator is doing, but I hope he's still alive. It must be difficult. But I have one more question for you, and then we'll open it to other people. Can you comment on the Arabization of peoples conquered by Islamic invaders, such as in Egypt, other North African countries, or Iran or Afghanistan? What were the consequences for those societies of Islamization?
Yeah, so the consequences for a lot of those countries is that they completely lost their cultures. They lost their religions, they lost their languages, they lost everything that they were beforehand. I mean, it's crazy when so many people, how surprised they are to find out that Afghanistan used to be a Buddhist country, and that the Muslims just blew up all of as many as they could of the big Buddhist statues and try to erase their past. And of course, if you go to Afghanistan today, there's no whiff of Buddhism. All you're seeing is women in burqas and Taliban everywhere. That is the same in almost every Muslim majority country. If it hasn't been erased already, it is in the process of being erased. So in countries like Indonesia and Malaysia, you can watch this happening in real time, where people are being told that they can't wear their own cultural clothing. They need to be wearing Muslim clothing, so hijab. People are being told you cannot be listening to your own cultural music because it's jahiliyyah, it's the ignorance. The days before Islam or anything pre-Islam is considered ignorance. And that's why in Egypt, very, unfortunately, everything that has to do with ancient Egyptian civilization is considered ignorance. And so they have no respect and no love and no appreciation for Egyptian civilization. It's, obviously the Brits and the rest of the Western world that were so interested and became Egyptologists. And now there is this renaissance of people, mostly people who have denounced Islam, who are reclaiming their pre-Islamic cultures, their pre-Islamic languages. And it's actually really nice to see, because especially in countries like Tunisia, where they used to be Berber or Amazigh, they're unearthing all of these stories and poetry and music and ways of making bread, even like all sorts of things that were just lost over the years. And so it's nice to see people trying to reclaim their pre-Islamic civilizations, because to be honest, especially somebody like me who grew up Muslim, it's really hard. Like your Arabness and your Muslimness is so intertwined that you kind of have PTSD from anything that has to do with Arabs or anything that has to do with Egyptians, because it just reminds you so much of Islam. So it's nice to be able to, feel pride in your heritage and in the thinkers that existed that were killed off by Muslims, and the thinkers and in the women and all of the stories that existed beforehand. It's nice to be able to feel pride in your heritage versus feeling nothing but shame. So.
Well, thank you, Yasmine. I think it's time to open it up to other people who may have other questions. And I know that Yolande had a question, and I cut him off earlier. I'm going to stop the interpretation, and I would invite, well, let's start with Yolande. What was your question?
Okay, sorry for that. I did not know your procedure, David. It's okay with me. There's no problems. the thing is that me, I am an athei for sure, for LPA. There's no problem with that. And when I look at this kind of thing of religion, I see that religion, Catholic, Judaic, or Buddhist, or Islam, it's all the same. How the prophet and how this guy suffer of a sickness, which is called schizophrenia, when that pupil think to speak with angel and everything. So that's okay. People are allowed to think the way you want. In your case, because you say a lot of time that you are still Muslim, so do you still?
Me?
Yeah, but no.
Oh no, monsieur.
Oh, I am sorry.
Oh no. Please don't insult me like that. No, I have not been a Muslim in over 20 years.
Did you change of religion, or you are an atheist now?
Oh yeah, no, I have been an atheist for over 20 years. Almost 20 years.
My mistake. I am sorry.
Yeah. Oh, okay. No, that's okay.
Being a Muslim is not a race. You can change.
Yeah, okay, that's okay. So that you answer my question. So I mean that you understand what I mean by this kind of stuff. Because sometimes I hear people that said, oh, they complain about Islam, but they approve Catholic religion, but it's not better. And
no, it's not better. I agree with what you're saying, but it's still a spectrum, Yolande. At the end of the day, it's still a spectrum, because even though the religion of, the Catholic religion is bad and it has lots of horrible things that can mistreat people, it currently today does not have the power, does not have the oil money. So it does not have the financial or the political power that Islam has. So the way that Islam is hurting people today far outweighs any other religion.
Oh, thanks very much. Merci.
Yes. Yeah. Marie Savoie, you have a question?
Just let me open my mic. Hi, Yasmine.
Hi.
So I found it very interesting when you talked about the fact that what brought you to criticize religion was the way women are treated. And I just wanted to say that I'm an atheist since the age of 16, which was very rare at that time. And for two reasons. First, I'm very rational, and I found it very irrational. I said, this is belief in God is like believing in Santa Claus for adults, there's an afterlife. And the other thing, which is still motivates me a lot in this fight, is the way all religions treat women and regard women as being quite inferior. And I find that very strange that a lot of the most fervent religious people are women. So I just, I don't understand it anyway. So I wanted to ask you this question. When, as I say, I am fighting for secularism here, and I do mean that it gets you involved in a lot of hard discussions with people, and you can lose friendships on this issue, especially with people on the left. People on the left will say it's a woman's right to wear the hijab. There's nothing wrong with the hijab. And when you talk about what's going on in Iran right now, what's going on in Afghanistan, where little girls can't even go to school anymore. And they say, well, that's over there. But here we have freedom. It's completely different. It's another universe. But if you talk to the same people about the environment, well, that's global. You have to think about it in here and what's going to happen over there. But about this religion, you just can't criticize Islam here. You're a racist if you do, because here they're all Muslim women, and this is very important because your book breaks that idea down. All Muslim women who wear hijab here are doing it freely, completely without any influence of any kind, and they have these hijabis who go to the media and are always very well, received and talked to by the media. And they say, it's my choice. My mother didn't wear it, but it's my choice. I want to do it. So can you respond to people who say, well, it's a woman's choice And over there, it's an obligation. It's just as bad to ban it here for people, for women who want to wear it. It's another universe over there. So
it's so infantile, that argument, isn't it? Like, what would make you think that women are forced into hijab in, you know, all of these 50 plus Muslim majority countries, but somehow the Muslim women in the West are fully free? Like, why would the geographical location make any difference? It's an ideology. It does not have borders. It travels in the minds of the people who believe in this. You know, like you said, there's my book, there's my story, but there are so many other stories, and they just continue to turn a blind eye to story after story after story after story. They just refuse to see it. They refuse to believe it. They ignore us. And even the fact that they would say to you, that's over there, like, we're not going to care because they happen to be miles away from us, so they don't matter anymore, so they're not human anymore. And these are the same people that will tell you that they're anti-racist and that they care about authentic voices and women of color and blah, 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 right? It's just virtue signaling. But at the end of the day, they will tell you the truth, which is that they don't care. They don't care about these women, and they will lie to protect the oppressors of these women. And I want to tell you, everybody here, I want to alert you to a video that was made by a Muslim woman. That's the key here. She's a Muslim woman living in the UK who used to be a hijabi model. So she used to be one of those people that you mentioned, Marie. She was one of those people that was the darling of the Islamists. Give her all the microphones, put her on all of the magazines and music videos. She was everywhere. She was so popular because she was regurgitating that Islamist garbage, that this is my choice and I love it and I want to wear it. And it's, you know, it's my empowerment and it's feminist and blah, blah, blah. So of course, that's the one that they want to hear from, because she's the one that's supporting the narrative that they also want to portray. When she decided that she wanted to take off her hijab and the truth came out, she wanted to be free, the attacks that she got from Muslim people, she ended up making a video, and the video is called The Bad, the Ugly, and the Worst, where she just sat there for almost an hour, just scrolling through, reading all of the death threats, reading all of the rape threats to her and to her family. And she just spent the whole hour just reading through. Just, this is what happens when one individual woman chooses what she's going to put on her own head in the United Kingdom.
Do you have her name? I'm sorry.
Yeah, her name is Dina Tokyo, but Tokyo is spelled Tokio.
Thank you.
And everybody here will probably remember the Shafia sisters.
Oh, yeah.
You'll probably remember that young Kurdish woman who was 16, Aqsa Parvez, whose father and brother killed her over the hijab in Mississauga, Ontario. The stories are endless, right? Everybody in America knows about those two girls in Texas that were killed by their father because they were wearing jeans and wanted to have boyfriends. And he was on the FBI most wanted list for 10 years. And when they finally found him, he was being protected by his family. And one of the people that was protecting him was the brother of the girls, like his own son. You're protecting the man that killed your sisters for 10 years before the FBI finally got him. They just ignore all of these stories and then pretend that it's the government that's controlling these women. It's not only the government. Yes, the government is controlling them. Yes, the religious police does throw these women in prison. But are we also going to ignore the fact that in Iran, just last year, a 14-year-old girl was decapitated by her father because he saw that she was texting a boy? That's not the government. You know, that's these honor killings. And I have to tell you, that father, he only got 4 years in prison. Whereas the women who don't wear hijab get over 20 years in prison. So that lets you know what's more valuable to them, the life of a woman or enforcing this tool of misogyny on women. So anyway, long story short, it's infantile for them to pretend that things are going to suddenly be so different just because you've walked to a different part of the earth. We're the same planet, we're the same people, and they have the same ideology, regardless of where they're standing on the earth.
Jean Thibodeau has his hand up. Jean?
Oui. Hi, Yasmine. Up so far, you have discussed many issues related to Islam in general. Now, I would like to ask you, up to your knowledge, if there are significant differences between Shiites and Sunnites about the way they conceive the Islamic law or laws and the way they implement it.
So I don't know if you're familiar with Monty Python. Are you familiar with Monty Python? Where they had the People's Republic of Judea and then the Republic of the People of Judea or something like that. Like it was just like the most minuscule difference, but they wanted to kill each other because they were, the enemy. That's what it is with Shia and Sunni. The differences basically was when Muhammad died, they wanted to know who is going to be the successor. Some people said it will be his best friend, Abu Bakr, and some people said it will be his cousin because it's, lineage, blood lineage. The people who followed Abu Bakr are now considered Sunni. They follow the Sunnah. And the ones who followed the cousin are considered Shia. The religion is not different. It was just a matter of who we're going to follow at that point. So yes, you will see some differences, some significant differences. One of them with Shia, for example, they're not supposed to be involved in any politics. That's one of the differences. Yes. So of course we can see that they're fully involved in politics in Iran. So that takes away that one major difference. Another major difference is that with Shia, they actually really respect and honor their imams, almost revere their imams in a way that Sunni Muslims do not. Sunni Muslims have no, it's Allah and it's Muhammad, that's it. An imam does not have any kind of power over the people. He cannot, like the way the Pope can maybe change some things and invite some progress and say, oh, now birth control is allowed or whatever it is. There's nobody in Sunni Islam that can do that. Nobody. The Quran and Hadith do not change from 1400 years and there will never be progress, not 1 inch of progress. But with Shia Islam, they have their imams, and if their imams say to them, the people that follow that particular imam, if he says, okay, women don't have to wear hijab anymore or whatever he chooses, he'll never say that, but just one example, then the people that follow him feel like they're safe from burning in hell for eternity because their imam has given this the green light. So that's the other major difference. Another one, I guess, is like with Muslims, if they denounce Islam, if you're Sunni, you're allowed 3 days before you're killed. But if you're Shia, you're just killed immediately. You're not given 3 days. So, when I talk about the differences, it's nuances like that. At the end of the day, look at Saudi Arabia and look at Iran. One, it follows Sharia, Sunni Sharia, and one follows Shia Sharia. So they're almost identical in the way that they control women and, you know, so many parts of their religion, like, you know, no alcohol, no homosexuals, you know, so many parts of their religion are the same. Kill atheists. Yeah, they wear different headgear. That's another difference.
But they terribly fight each other.
And they fight and they want to kill each other. Yes. And that's a one big, huge part of it. All of this mess that we're seeing right now, the only reason why Islam has any control in the world today, because back when my mom was young in the 60s, Islam was like in the villages with the uneducated people. You never saw hijab in the cities. You never saw educated people reading the Quran. This was like old school stuff for the old people. But what happened was when Iran when this Islamic revolution happened and the Shia Muslims had some political power, well, that just put fear in all of the Sunni Muslims. They thought, well, if they're going to have political power, we better have political power because they're going to be the dominant Islam. So we have to make sure that we're the dominant Islam. And that's why you saw what you saw happening in Saudi Arabia. And it went on from there. And that all happened when bin Laden was a child, and this is the world he grew up in. And yeah, so you can watch the trajectory happen from 1979 to today, how it's just basically that's the fight. Sunni versus Shia, and we're all victims of it.
It reminds me of the characters Tweedledum and Tweedledee.
You got it.
I think that's in Alice in Wonderland, I think. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
There's a question from Michel Belly.
Yeah, just a small comment. In Egypt, I mean, with the increase of Islamism, at one point there was some people that were Muslims that were criticizing Islamism, and they were accused of being Islamophobic. Yeah. Okay, so we had also the point I want to make is that in Egypt there are Muslims that are treated as people that are Islamophobic. So can you comment on that?
Yes, that definitely happens, and you know that recently happened with this. Saudi Arabia was speaking out against Ilhan Omar, and then Ilhan Omar accused them of being Islamophobic. So I think they just get carried away with using this all the time to anybody, any detractors to any criticism, that they sometimes forget that they're even talking to Muslims. But yes, so what's happening, what you're referring to there is political Islam, which are groups like the Muslim Brotherhood, obviously the Islamic Republic of Iran, Hezb Tahrir, you know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's so many of them. Those are Islamist groups that basically threaten the monarchy in Saudi Arabia or threaten the democracy in some Muslim majority countries. And so the governments of those countries have deemed those Islamists as terrorists. They are illegal organizations. So those organizations that are free to organize in America and Canada and in the UK, they are considered terrorist organizations in countries like Egypt, the Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, et cetera, et cetera. So there's that misunderstanding that people in the West don't understand the difference between a regular Muslim who just wants to live their life and maybe pray in their mosque or whatever, but they are not interested in spreading the word of Allah. They're not interested in, you know, making sure that there's prayer rooms everywhere and that the adhan is coming from the mosque loudspeakers and that, you know, that their daughters can wear hijab and all of those things. The Islamists, however, are the ones that you will see that are, just in the UK recently, they have a counter-terrorist group, And that counter-terrorist group is being called Islamophobic by Muslim organizations in the UK right now. So even fighting against terrorism is considered Islamophobia. So those are Islamists. Those are people that are very active in using secular laws against itself. So they very transparently talk about how they're going to spread Islam. They talked about, we spread Islam the first time with the sword, and we can't do that again this time. So we have to find better ways. And they've deemed one of the ways to be immigration. Another one of the ways is to be through the wombs of the Muslim mothers. So marry 4 women, impregnate, marry them young so they can have many childbearing years, impregnate them as many times as you can so that their numbers will rise, and then they'll be politically powerful in a democratic nation. And the third way is by using secular laws against themselves. And that's through this freedom of religion. So freedom of religion means I can perform FGM on my child. There's nothing you can do about it because it's my religion, which actually does happen. That happened in the United States. The Ayaan Hirsi Ali Foundation was one of the organizations that had this huge investigation. And there was a doctor in Michigan who she wasn't prosecuted, but she was on trial because of the fact that she had performed so many FGM cases. And the Muslim community came up, of course, to support her financially and to say it is our right to mutilate our daughters because it's our religious right. And she never ended up going to prison. It was dismissed because it's her religious right. It's their religious right to cut off their daughter's clitoris with a razor blade. So that's what I mean when I say use secular laws against itself.
I would just like to say in connection with that, Yasmine, that the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution says that religious practice cannot be limited. So it reads as if freedom of religion were absolute. So in other words, you have to rely on some other law that might put a limitation on that. There's no limit at all in the First Amendment. And some people think it implements secularism, but unfortunately it does not.
No, you're right.
We have a question from Elspeth. Elspeth?
Yes, hello. So what I want to tell you is over the past 4 years or so, I've been seen by 4 medical doctors who wear hijab. Then my new optometrist wears a hijab. Then I went for my mammogram and the technician was wearing a hijab. And, you know, I just thought being a medical doctor, all those years and years and years of education, wouldn't the person be more likely to be atheist or humanist? So I'm wondering, Yasmine, does it have to do with their family? Their family has paid for all those years of education, maybe? And so the medical doctor has to go along with what the family wants, do you think?
That could be one of the reasons. There could be lots of different reasons. One of my friends is a pediatric surgeon at Children's Hospital in Vancouver, and she would never publicly, she would never remove her hijab. She would never let her family know that she's not Muslim anymore out of, like you said, yes, it's partially because her parents supported her this far, which is very rare she's from Oman, which is probably more progressive than other areas of the Gulf in the fact that they let their daughters become educated. But it's also, if I can be honest with you, it offers you currency in today's Canada. It really does. Wearing a hijab or being visually seen as a minority or a woman of color offers her some I don't know, I don't know what to say. Like, it's not even just her specifically, because I don't want to make this about her, but I was just speaking to somebody else who was applying for a scholarship in America, Afghani, ex-Muslim, but you betcha in her college application, she went on about being a Muslim Afghani and the Americans and what they did to my country. And you know what I mean? Because she knew that's what's going to get her the scholarship, and she was correct. So, I think at the end of the day, people do what they need to do to what works best for them. And, who knows what the specific reasons are for these specific women. But I do want to say in a general way that it's not necessarily education, but it's critical thinking. People can be educated, but I'm not sure exactly what the medical field is like, but I know for me in more humanist degrees, there's a lot of critical, like you're forced, it's not just rote learning, rote memorization. There's a lot of pushing you out of your comfort zone. And if you don't embrace that, then it's very easy to have that, what's the word I'm looking for, you guys, when people have two thoughts in their head at the same time, which are completely
cognitive
opposed
dissonance.
Thank you, David. Yeah, so they live comfortably with their cognitive dissonance if it's serving them. Yeah.
I wanted to comment about what you said, Yasmine, about attitudes in Canada. People claim that Muslims are persecuted in Canada. The reality is that I think fundamentalist Muslims are privileged.
Absolutely.
Whereas secular Muslims are ignored, and it's even worse for ex-Muslims. So
thank you.
We have a question from Jean Thibodeau again. Jean?
Oui. I would like to come back to my first question. If I asked about the differences between Shia and Sunni, is the way you say it in English, I think. It's because I'm very concerned about what's going on in Iran, actually. And I'm trying to figure out how this revolution could end. Otherwise, that's the way that it is contré by the Ayatollahs, and there are geopolitical ingredients that make I feel makes that very difficult, because Iran is the very core of the Shia mentality, if I may say that, and both have their terrorist organization that are specific to them. And also there's the fact that Iran is about the only ally left that has Vladimir Putin, actually. So how could this all play in the way that this revolution is evolving right now?
Je ne sais pas. I don't know. I think the best hope we have is that most people in Iran are not Muslim right now. Most of them have been raised under the Islamic Republic of Iran, and they hate it. They hate everything to do with Islam. So, one of the if you guys are familiar with an imam in France named Imam Hassan Chalgoumi, who is a progressive thinking imam. He speaks out against anti-Semitism. He speaks up for women's equality. He was telling me that he went to one of these protests for Iranian women, and they were just screaming at him because he looks like an imam. He's wearing the imam hat, and they were like, get out of here. And he's like, I support you. And they're like, we don't want you here. We don't want your support. Get out. Like, they just are so, they're so triggered by anything to do with Islam that they don't want anything to do with religion whatsoever. So I think that's a good sign. But as far as what's gonna be the next step, what's going to come of this, I don't know. Who knows? You know, there's talk of them going back to being a monarchy. There's talk of them, you know, there's a huge communist support in Iran as well. So it could go in many different directions. I don't know which way it's going to go, but let's hope that it goes well.
We have a question from Barry Wolfram. Barry?
Hello. I'm calling or meeting you from Thunder Bay, Ontario. I would like to redirect a bit on the question of a woman you see in the West. In Thunder Bay, we have a small mosque here. And if I see a woman in hijab, and your comment was there should be no distinction between someone wearing a hijab here or someone wearing a hijab in Saudi Arabia, where they cut people's heads off. How do I know what kind of attitude, if I meet such a woman here and she says, no, I love my religion and this is my expression of faith and my desire to have an image of modesty in my community, and all of that. And further, another slant on it is, can you give me your interpretation of the difference between the hijab and the burqa?
Okay, so to answer your first question, you'll never know. You won't know. Because when I wore my hijab, I also talked about how it was my choice. Because what were my options, Barry? Was I going to tell you that I'm so demoralized, that I'm so disempowered, that I can't even choose what to put on my own head? I don't want to tell you that. I'm not interested in humiliating myself. I don't even want to admit that to myself, let alone to you. So you won't know what she's thinking. You won't know if she really believes in it or not, or if she's forced into it, or if she's doing it because it's offering her currency in her current environment. You'll never know, and you don't need to know. It doesn't matter. All you need to know is that this is a tool of misogyny created by a religion to control women. That's what you need to know. So do you want to support a tool of misogyny that was created by a religion to control women? Do you want to support a tool of misogyny that gets women imprisoned, that gets women, attacked with acid, that gets women killed? That's what you need to ask yourself. Don't concern yourself with what are at each individual woman's, what's in her heart or what's in her mind, things that maybe she's not even aware of. We're not going to get the answer to that question. And it's none of our business really to dig deep into every single individual's intentions. So that answers the first question. And the second question, the only difference between a hijab and a burqa is the length of cloth, really. It's meant to control women. It's just different ways of doing it. So I wore hijab and I wore niqab. And of course, the experience of wearing hijab and wearing niqab are two very different things, because when you're in niqab, I describe it as a sensory deprivation chamber. You can't see properly, you can't hear properly, you can't touch things properly, because I had gloves that were sent to me from Saudi Arabia. You're completely separated from the world around you. You walk around like a ghost. People You can see everybody, but nobody can see you. So you're completely dehumanized. You're completely detached. So it's obviously the experience of wearing niqab is, astronomically worse than wearing hijab. However, the purposes of these, there's so many different levels of hijab, right? It's the spectrum. Some women will wear it with makeup and jeans, some, you know what I mean? But then all the way to the head to toe black, like I used to wear, that didn't even show your eyes. So anywhere within that spectrum, it's just to control women. It's just different lengths of fabric, different colors of fabric, but it is a tool to control women and to remind them that they are lesser than. And I call it a tool of rape culture as well, because it supports things like victim blaming, which tells the women, if you are harassed, or if you are assaulted, or if you are raped, that's your fault because you enticed him. You didn't cover yourself up properly. And young girls are told this. So you can just imagine the kind of child molestations that are gone quietly, because girls don't want to tell on themselves by saying, I was molested by my teacher or my uncle or whatever, because she knows that she's the one that's going to be at fault because she didn't cover herself properly, because we've already been given that message. And then, of course, there's the whole slut shaming thing, the whole thing of like good, clean Muslim women wear hijab, but slave girls are not allowed to wear hijab, so that men can know the difference between, the good girls that they're not to touch, and then the whores that are free for raping. And that mentality continues with the good, clean girls are the ones that cover themselves up in hijab, and the ones that don't cover are asking for it.
I would like to make a quick comment. I think to summarize the meaning, the hijab has an objective meaning regardless of the motivation of the women wearing it. That's maybe interesting to know if you want to know that particular person, but in general, it's irrelevant. The hijab has the meaning which you have just described. It's a symbol which makes the woman responsible for the sexual behavior of men, and which is why it is a symbol of rape culture. And the particular reasons are, they may be interesting, but they're irrelevant to the general question of what does the hijab do. Yeah. Yola again has raised his hand.
Thanks a lot, Yasmine. It's a good point that we just talked about. Is said that when a person wears her hijab, we don't know if it's what level it is. So when you were speaking, what I got in mind, my idea is that maybe the 21 law in Quebec will allow the pupil to see who is a fanatic and who is not. Because a fanatic who wants to be a teacher will not be able to remove his hijab, while a person who is not in that direction will be able to remove her hijab while he's working and wear it at home. Does it make sense to you?
Yes, it does make sense to me. And another reason why, when you're talking about the children in Bill 21, another reason why it's important too is because quite often girls are forced to wear hijab from a young age. And when there are teachers in the school that are also wearing hijab, those teachers are like the soldiers, right? They are the protectors of the girls. Normal, like in my age, what was very common and what's still common is that girls, when they leave their house, they take off their hijab and they put it in their bag and they live their whole day at school. And then when it's time to go home again, they put their hijab back on and they walk into the house. So this is a very common occurrence that has been happening all over the Western world for decades. But when you have a teacher in your school who's wearing hijab, you're afraid of her because you know that she's going to tell your family on you. And so it doesn't allow those girls even that little bit of freedom that they would have had in their lives.
I've heard this used as an argument against Bill 21. I've heard people say we want to allow women who are fanatics to wear the hijab, even when they teach. That way, the children can recognize who's a fanatic and they can govern themselves accordingly. It's totally ridiculous, but
it is ridiculous. And like Yolande said, if she is a fanatic, she will not remove it. She will not remove it. She will stay home. She'll find another job, but she will not remove it.
Well, she should find another job, not teaching, if she won't remove this.
Yeah.
Jean Thibodeau?
Oui. I'll come back to the feminism topic. You know certainly that intersectional feminists define feminism by the concept of liberty of choice, individual liberty of choice. So they will tell you, if you talk about what's going on in Iran, for instance, that they approve the Iran women who want to have the right not to wear the veil, but here they defend the liberty of those who want to wear it. So feminism for them is just a matter of individual liberty. That's their argument. I would also mention that I see in the veil 3 dimensions. The religious one, the cultural one, and the political one. Some of those who are in court actually against Bill 21 say that when they wear the veil, they feel closer to their God. Of course, it's difficult to answer that. The only thing that comes to my mind is would be to ask them then, okay, but why do you adore such a sexist God? The cultural part is the most tricky because, of course, veil has been part of cultural life in many Muslim countries. I imagine that for older women, for instance, who were told to wear the veil when they were very young, and they had all their life wearing it, and of course they could say it's part, it has become part of my identity. And I may understand that. So then to reply to that, there's something to say about which part of personal identities have to be taken into account by governments and laws and charters and so on. And of course, the political one, well, rarely you will hear about women who say, I wear it because I am defending the Islamist way of thinking. But we know that exists, of course. So this makes quite a mess in the discussions when...
But again, Jean, I'll say to you, it doesn't matter. The reasons, the individual woman's reasons for wearing it, or what her intentions are, or what she's thinking or feeling, even subconsciously, none of those things are relevant to us deciding if we support hijab or not.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to look at it just objectively as a religious tool of misogyny and not be pulled down into the weeds trying to figure out what are the intentions of each individual woman. Is it for this reason or that reason or whatever? It's irrelevant.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
any of those things could be true. You're right. It could be religious, it could be cultural, it could be political, it could be a mix of the three, it could be some other things even as well. It doesn't matter to me. Mm-hmm. Hijab is a tool of misogyny that controls women. It's basically violence against women, and I hate it and I am against it. Mm-hmm. Full stop.
I do agree with you, of course, but unhappily in Canada, it's not the way justices see things. If you read the first judgment about Bill 21, that's clear that's not the way the judge thought. Freedom, individual freedom is considered as a fundamental right.
Well, you've given I think, Jean, you've hit the bobo on the button in the sense that it's you said that intersectionality promotes is obsessed with individual personal freedoms and doesn't take into account larger considerations or collective phenomena. And a religion is very much a collective phenomenon, and the hijab has effects beyond the individual. So the solution is to criticize the idea that individual rights should take precedence over everything. I think that's the whole point. Mm-hmm. Individual rights are important, but they have to be balanced with other considerations. Mm-hmm. We have Marie Savoie has put her hand up again. Marie.
My mic, okay. So the thing is, you have two types of feminism. Of course, Jean spoke very well about the intersectionality, that things that believes that your rights depend on your community. This is what happened to you. You have as many rights as a child. You had the rights that were allowed in your community, according to the terrible judge who threw you back there. Mm-hmm. But there's the feminist universalism, and that's the kind of feminism I adhere to. Everyone has the same rights. Doesn't matter. Every woman has the same right. Doesn't matter where she's living on this planet. And that's what we're trying to say. But then we have these media, les chéris des médias, that, these hijabis, young women, very articulate, usually good looking, and they're invited on, they get all the microphones, and you see them on television saying that the hijab is empowering for them and it's their culture, so don't criticize it. You can criticize my culture. You're not allowed. This is Canada. Cultures are supreme. So talk about the universal rights of women? No, it's my cultural right. So we end up in this dead end situation.
You're right, that does happen, and it's a lie. When she tells you it's her culture, ask her, what is her culture? Is she Somali? Is she Pakistani? Is she Egyptian? Is she Indonesian? What is her culture? Because none of these cultures share a language, share a food, share anything. They share no traditions in common. This is not a culture. This is a religion. That is what binds these 50 countries. It's a religion. They don't share a culture. They are incredibly different culturally. They are so varied culturally. Even the 20 so-called Arab countries are completely varied culturally. They have completely different cultures. Even just the way that they say hello you know, that the way that they kiss on the cheek or whatever is completely different in each of these different cultures. There's so many differences. What they share is a religion. So when they try to tell you that they share a culture, that is just a blatant lie. And it's a lie that can be perpetuated because of the ignorance of the regular Westerner, thinks of Muslims as a race and thinks of Islam as a culture. And both of those obfuscations are on purpose. They do that on purpose. They do that to fool you so that it can be followed by, this is my culture, this is my race. And both of those statements are lies, but it's so that they can use secular laws against them itself. That's the point. That's the plan. And that's what they have been doing so well.
Mm. Would anyone else like to? Oh,
I just want to speak to one more thing. Just
go ahead,
Marie, when you mentioned too that it's all of these women that have the microphones and they're well-spoken and, you know, talking about how being empowering and feminist and yada yada. You're only going to hear their voices. You're never going to hear the voices of the women that hate the hijab. You're never going to hear the voices of the feminist women in these Muslim majority countries. First of all, they might already be dead. But even if they are alive, they're silenced. They're not only silenced by their own communities, but they're silenced here in the West as well, because the West doesn't want to support, like David said, they are the ones who are being persecuted. They're the ones that are being discriminated against and being ignored. Any progressive thinking Muslim and any ex-Muslim for sure. But it's the fundamentalists, it's the orthodox, it's the extremists. They're the ones that you'll hear their voices because they're supported A, by the Muslim community and all of the different Muslim groups, and B, they're supported by the Western progressives or Western liberals.
Who are very strong in English Canada, because
Correct.
Of course Justin Trudeau shows the way, and he says that you cannot restrain anything that has to do with religion at all, which is a lie. You could, and for the common good.
Absolutely.
Well, it has to do with multiculturalism, which is the opposite of universalism. It encourages people to remain tribal and not to value universal principles. Pierre Marchand, did you have your hand up?
Well, just a small question. You mentioned that you may be a target from your family or from your even friends. Are you afraid for your life all the time?
I'm not afraid of my family anymore. I was when I had first escaped. But now that I'm public, I'm afraid of just regular terrorists. Just your average everyday jihadi, you know,
but
especially after what happened to Salman Rushdie in New York. There was a huge surge of fear through the ex-Muslim community, but we buckled down. You know, we said, well, like I said before, terrorism works. Terrorism is successful, but terrorism is only successful if you let it be successful. And it was actually Salman Rushdie who gave us the most beautiful quote. So it was such poetic justice, where he said that, you know, their method of control is terrorism, is fear. So if we do not allow ourselves to be afraid, then we've taken away their control. And so we had a choice at that time when we were all feeling very scared. And of course, all of the jihadis online were feeling very empowered to tell us, you're next, you're next. So what we ended up doing instead was we created videos where we shared quotes from the satanic verses, and we did everything we could to support free expression. And it's the kind of thing that I wish had happened after Charlie Hebdo. So after the Charlie Hebdo attack, you had journalists too scared to even show the cartoon that they were referring to. And what should have happened is that cartoon should have been plastered everywhere, because that's how you respond to terrorism. You respond to it by saying, we will not be terrorized.
Thank you.
Barry Wolfram?
Yes, the concept, I really want to thank you for how clearly you've placed these issues, particularly the woman who claims to be happy with her faith in public with hijab. But the absurdity of religion being completely unlimited. I think Sam Harris put it that way. What in a hypothetical, he said, what if your holy text said every third child should walk in darkness? And they interpreted that to mean they put out the eyes of the third born child of every family. Could we sanction that behavior? And the respondent said, well, if they said it in the name of their religion, there's nothing we can do about it. And I'd see that as, what about Charlie Hebdo? What about Salman Rushdie? In other words, and Theo Van Gogh, and all the many women, the woman honor killing in Ontario one time, her body found in a canal. Well, I did it for religious reasons. You know, my knife is in Theo's chest with a note on it warning everybody else, because that's what Allah commands me to do. You can't tell me not to. The absurdity of any crime, we haven't got a criminal law anymore. You cannot censure any act if you can make it a religion. Well, and yet you're saying that our own prime minister is following that logic. Is he putting a limit on it himself, or what? Is he opening the door to murder? How do we interpret this kind of interpretation? Whether it's Canada or the US, where we want freedom of religion. Yeah, we want freedom of religion, but not to the extent of violating the criminal law. And there must be even more limitations, I'm sure. Can you respond to that?
You're exactly correct, Barry. We don't have boundaries. We don't have those limitations, and we absolutely need them. When they were bringing in Syrian refugees into Europe, some of the children were actually brides. And the German people struggled with this for a moment. They're like, oh, should we let this 50-year-old man bring in his 13-year-old wife? Like, should we say something about this? Should we, should we have a problem with this? And then they realized that they can't, because that's his religious right. And so they let it slide. And so you're absolutely correct. All sorts of atrocities. I talked about FGM earlier, but there's, if we're not, if anybody can just say it's my religious freedom, then they can do all sorts of atrocities. And if you're familiar with Leah Remini, she's fighting against Scientology, and that's her biggest issue right now. They're doing all sorts of horrible things, but it's all hidden under the guise of religious freedom. And the religious people themselves are not complaining. So,
well, I think if Justin Trudeau were confronted with an obvious example of FGM, he would say he opposes it. However, he's far too nice about it. For example, he objected to the use of the word barbaric, I think, to describe
exactly.
FGM.
Yes,
so,
and he removed it, or his minister, his Somali minister, where there even more women are, attacked by FGM in Somalia than they are in Egypt. His minister removed that from the immigration documents, the clause that said that you should not perform this on your daughters here in Canada.
And language is important. FGM is a barbaric practice. It's barbaric.
Absolutely.
And we should say it. And to be afraid to say it is a problem. Yeah, Barry, your hand is up again.
Well, I just thought of an even further absurdity. The Catholic Church, as a part of its religion, regularly tied people to stakes and burned them to death. Heretics, Jews, apostates, anybody they didn't like. What if they were to suddenly, oh my, you can't limit religion. Well, we can bring back all these powers again to enforce our religion. Yeah, that little giggle, I don't know who did it, but that's what it brings to me. How absurd.
I did.
People are not, oh yeah, people are not thinking of carrying these to their logical conclusions. Anyway, that's enough for.
Can I jump in?
One moment, Jean, you had your hand up again?
Yeah. Of course, I am in favor of laïcité. And of course, I agree with Yasmine that Bill 21 should have gone much farther than it does. But even then, at my eyes, it's still not enough. And I would like to ask Yasmine how she would react to this idea that comes more and more to my mind since a few months. That is, the charters of rights protect freedom of thinking, freedom of conscience, and of course, freedom of religion. But they also protect religious cults, religious practices. And I think personally that cults and practices should be removed from what is specified in charters as being protected. There's a lot of difference, of course, between having the right to think anything somebody may think, including about religion, and what comes in practice in real life from religious laws. This part, I don't see any reason why it continues to be protected as such. What do you think?
I agree with you. Don't have much to say.
I would add that I think that freedom in human rights charters, freedom of religion should never be mentioned, except if it's mentioned also freedom from religion. In other words, one should never be invoked without the other. So, and freedom of conscience already includes both of those. So it's not fair to say freedom of conscience and religion. I mean, the and religion is redundant, and it gives special status to religion. Freedom of conscience, and if you want to make it clear, it includes freedom of religion, freedom from religion, freedom of apostasy, and a lot of other things. Also, another thing to keep in mind is we have to distinguish between freedom to believe and freedom to practice. Belief and practice are two different things, and practice goes a lot further. And so practice needs to be limited, whereas belief is almost absolutely, you can believe whatever the heck you want. And for example, Bill 21 only affects practice, not belief at all. And it only affects practice for certain employees. And another thing to keep in mind is that for secularism, the law of the land is always superior to any law of so-called God. That is, it's the law of reality that applies. If there's a contradiction with some religious law, it's the law of that the people have decided on which counts, and not the law of some religious authority. I believe Marie wanted to say something, and then Barry.
Actually, what I wanted to mention is that it relates to what Barry was saying, that, well, if you invoke a freedom of religion, it's your religion, you could do anything. Actually, you can't, because causing bodily harm in Canada, well, that would not be accepted. But just to, I don't know if you're aware of this, Yasmine. A few years ago, actually, there's a doctor in my family. I had this conversation with him, and he was saying, well, it was about FGM, and a lot of women around here are from Somalia, and there's a hospital, and they were wondering, and he was saying, well, sometimes the man requests that the woman be sewn back or something like that. And this doctor was saying, well, it's their culture, and it's better to be done in a hospital than it. And this was really being discussed to the point that the Canadian Society of Gynecologists had to issue a formal directive saying that could not be done, and either FGM, anything like it's. They say, of course, it's the harm reduction approach. It's better in a hospital with antiseptics than in a kitchen with a knife. No, you can't do that. There is a law against inflicting bodily harm in Canada, mutilation. But the doctors were actually considering this to say this would be one way to reduce the harm of FGM. It's incredible.
How Western liberals empower radical Islam.
Says it all. Yeah. I believe, Barry, you had something to add?
Well, I was just putting a thumbs up reaction to your comments.
Okay. Well, it's past 4 p.m. I would say last call for any further questions or comments. We'll wrap it up in a minute. Any further observations? I want to thank Yasmine for agreeing to do this. It's been very eye-opening and very useful. And by the way, I don't have a physical copy of the book in English, but this is Yasmine's book in French, which was recently, I don't know if you can see me, which was recently published here in Quebec. Lever le voile. The English cover is similar, with a picture of a hijab being discarded. Jacques Deschênes, you have your hand up.
You're muted, Jacques.
You just need to unmute your microphone.
Okay. Hi, Yasmine.
Hello.
In your group, where you encounter Muslim women, you know, passing from a Muslim like religion to, I know, a secular way of life, do they lack, that kind of, you know, passing by doing a prayer 5 times a day to nothing? Is there like a kind of a void there, or is it not an issue?
No, there's lots of voids with everything. It's a completely, you know, the movie, The Truman Show?
Yeah.
It's like that.
Okay.
You're living, your whole life is a lie. Everything you've ever known is a lie. And the thing with Islam, which makes it distinct from a lot of other religions, is that every single minute of your day is dictated, not just the 5 prayers, everything. From when you open your eyes in the morning, you know, how you put your clothes on, how you go to the bathroom, how you drink water, how you cut your nails, every single step of your life is dictated. So you never have the opportunity to think. You never have the opportunity to use your brain, even for the most mundane choices, even for like, what am I going to wear today? It's already decided for you. Okay. So when you leave that religion and you know, it's a freedom, but it's also, there's a lot of fear that comes with it. There's a lot of insecurity, a lot of discomfort. This is why I have my organization, Free Hearts, Free Minds.
And
so we have,
how can we help in a way? I mean, in our regular life and daily life, I mean, can we do be a kind of support of any kind?
Well, you could support my organization.
Okay,
we're very happy to. We run on donations, and we always have a very long waiting list. But I wanted to tell you that the very first session that we have is about identity, because you truly have lost your identity. You are told over and over and over and over and over again that you are a Muslim first and foremost, before you are a father, before you are a man, before you are a Canadian, before you are anything, you are a Muslim.
Yeah.
And so when you take that away, you have to replace it with something. You have to discover, who am I? Who do I want to become, really? It is a very jarring, difficult, scary, you know, traumatic experience.
Okay.
But of course, when you come out the other side of it, it's all worth it. But it's a difficult process for sure.
It's a long desert. I mean, you know.
Yeah.
Okay. Fine.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
One final comment from Marie Savoie.
Okay, and I just wanted to let you know, well, you made a short video in which you explain your support for Bill 21. And I shared it. This is on your Twitter page. And so many people here in Quebec have shared it and have said that they really like it, given it likes, because it's just so rare for us to have someone who gets it, who gets the way we see secular. Well, actually, it's laicity is a little different, but who gets the idea that why separating church and state is just so important to us. So thank you for that. That's a very good, important way of supporting it.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you, Marie.
An excellent note to end on. Support for Bill 21 is extremely important, especially in Canada, where there is so much hostility, so much misunderstanding, so many lies and misconceptions. Anyway, thank you again, Yasmine, for coming here today. Thank you to all of you for attending.
Yes,
it's been very useful. Well, we'll do something similar again soon, I hope. We'll be in touch through various means, email, on our websites and so on, and social media. So thank you, everyone, and thank you, Yasmine.
Enjoy your stay in France.
Merci.
Merci beaucoup.
Merci.
And good luck.
Thank you.
Merci. Good luck.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.